Hi everyone! I'm back with another recap of the Assistant to the Villain series, but today we are going to recap Apprentice to the Villain. Now, I loved Assistant to the Villain, but Apprentice to the Villain stole my heart. There are so many good moments in this book, and it is such a good story. I could literally write a dissertation on the ways that I love this book. I digress. Let's hop into it. Let's get into the recap. When the book opens, we see the villain in captivity and we see Evie is dead. The villain is in King Benedict's dungeons and he does not believe that Evie is actually dead. He thinks that King Benedict is just taunting him and trying to break his spirit and getting him to break. Tristan, super angry, keeps fighting and fighting and fighting, finally makes his way out of his cell and into a different room. It happens to be the room where Evie is actually dead on a table. He just absolutely loses it, basically tries to choke out King Benedict and kill him, ends up thinking better of it, his conscience gets the better of him, and then he ends up going back to Evie while she's on the table. He is completely distraught and ends up crying and begging her to come back and kisses her hand and just pleads with her to come back. Now that he's completely broken, he thinks that he can get the villain to relinquish the male and female goof, and he also details that he's going to unmask the villain at the end of the week. All of this is part of this big prophecy that's from Renadon's story. Now, Renadon's story is a children's book, and this makes the king sound a little bit insane, but we find out a little bit later on that Renadon's story could have been this lore or legend handed down from the gods themselves, and then just twisted and morphed into a children's story. The prophecy calls for three things: an unmasked villain, Fate's offspring, and starlight power. The unmasked villain is, of course, the villain. Fate's child would be a baby goof, and starlight magic would be a person with starlight magic. And if you remember, Nora Sage had starlight magic, which is why the king wanted her so badly. The king is working so hard to fulfill this prophecy because in this prophecy, the land is promised to you forever if you fulfill it. He wants to be the one to save everyone, and he wants to be the one to inherit the land. The villain refuses and completely shuts down, and we fast forward a little bit to his unmasking. At the unmasking, not only is Tristan on the stage, but his father Arthur is there too. Evie is in a separate space in the room in a glass casket. Tristan is completely broken, and his father Arthur is pleading with him, begging him, please care for your life, care for your identity, please fight back. Tristan is absolutely bereft. He chooses not to fight for his life. Little does he know that Evie had a plan. Both Blade and Becky are in the audience, as well as some members of the Malevolent Guard. Evie comes back to life in the glass casket, slips out while everyone's watching the king give his grand speech, and just unleashes havoc. She starts going off on this grandiose speech. She gives time to stall for the villain, but then she also signals the Malevolent Guard to start attacking. The king didn't think to check the women, and most of the Malevolent Guard are made up of women. They start attacking, they cause chaos. Claire and Tatiana come and uncuff Arthur and Tristan. They start fighting back. Evie drops the chandelier from the ceiling. Whenever Tristan reunites with Evie, he decides that he needs to unmask as well. He's not content with letting her unmask herself when he goes unmasked. So he has her take off his mask, and now both of their identities are known. Tristan and Evie end up running out of the palace. They're running through the forest. They're trying to escape the Valiant Guard, and Tristan follows Evie straight off the ledge of a ravine. Luckily, the rest of the group is there with Fluffy the dragon, and Evie and Tristan land safely on Fluffy, and they fly the rest of the way back to the manor. Once they're back at the manor, Evie says that she has the letters from her mother. They don't say much, but there is this poem, and the villain recognizes it. It leads them to a place not far away called the Kissing Oaks. So a small group of them, Tristan, Evie, Blade, and Fluffy, they all head over to the Kissing Oaks to try and find the next clue. They're trying to find Nora Sage first and her starlight magic so that the villain can fulfill the prophecy first instead of King Benedict. Evie and Tristan make their way to the Kissing Oaks. There's this magical being that they have to pass in order to get into the cave. And once they're inside the cave, they see this fantastic giant creature. And essentially there's this whole other world down in the cave. There's a big sky, there's a field of dandelions, and this giant creature and lots of clouds. Evie, being the sweetheart that she is, ends up charming the creature. Although the creature says that it can't meddle in human affairs, it does gift her a vial of stardust. Now the stardust does something magical, but when we receive it, we don't know what it is. The creature does say that it hopes that Evie returns, and they end up leaving so that they can continue on their journey. When they get back to Fluffy, they see that everyone is surrounded by valiant guards, and Evie, Tristan, Blade, and Claire have to fight their way out of it. Little do they know that they have one of the knights on their side, who happens to be Gideon, Evie's thought to be dead brother. Turns out he was in the Valiant Guard for the past 10 years and forgot his identity for 5 of those 10 years. Once he found out about what their father did to Evie, he decided that he was going to break rank, he was going to go to Evie, and he was going to help her out. This was just his time where he fully introduced himself and finally left the Valiant Guard for good. They all return to the manor, and we get a little sneak peek into Lissa's life there. She starts making friends with Edwin the ogre, and she starts baking and cooking and just enjoying her life there. She also takes after Evie and wants to make friends with people that don't really like her, so of course she takes to Becky from HR. Once Lissa is preoccupied, Evie and the villain decide that they're going to use the Stardust. They end up using it, and it helps to create a map of Renadon. On that map of Renadon, it highlights a specific village, the Heart Village. So they realize that that's the next step in their journey. That's where they have to go. They decide that only a few of them are going to go to the Heart Village. Tristan, Evie, Claire, and Tatiana. On their way to the Heart Village, Evie sniffs this peony flower, which apparently makes you drunk. It intoxicates you. Unbeknownst to her, in order to get into the Heart Village, they have to be let through by the Guardians of the Bridge. And the Guardians of the Bridge typically will give you a riddle that you have to solve. The group decides, okay, Evie has to go home and sober up. There's no way that we're taking her into the Heart Village while she's drunk. However, the Guardians of the Bridge catch them before they could leave, and they say that if Evie can solve a riddle all by herself, in her intoxicated state, then the group of them can enter into the Heart Village with the creature's blessing. Evie ends up solving the riddle, they all walk into the Heart Village, and Tristan has to relinquish his magic while he's there. Once inside, they decide to split up. Tristan and Evie are going to go look for signs of Nura Sage, and Claire and Tati are going to go look for an enchantress. Parts of the manor have started to become visible because the wards are breaking, and they need an enchantress to fix it. Once they're separated, Evie and Tristan end up getting captured by a troupe of play actors. The play actors end up capturing them for the 1,000 gold coin reward for Tristan and the 300 gold coin reward for Evie. They capture them, put them on a boat, and take them to the playhouse and lock them in the drunk tank downstairs. Now, unfortunately, this underground drunk tank runs underneath the river. So the small windows that are there have water rushing by it. They end up getting locked in, and who comes down but Evie's cousin Helena. Evie is so surprised and asks her about her mother, and Helena says that Nura was there for about 2 to 3 months, about 2 to 3 years ago. She hasn't seen her since, and when Evie asks, okay, let us out, Helena says, no, I own this place and I'm not letting you out. Tristan and Evie start to try to escape, and Tristan accidentally breaks one of the windows and the dungeon starts filling up. They think they're goners. Evie decides, if this is it, I'm gonna tell him how I really feel. I'm gonna ask him to kiss me. Tristan still thinks that she's drunk, so he thinks that he can't take advantage of someone who's under the influence. Of course, Evie is hurt, Tristan is confused, but thankfully Kingsley saves the day. He breaks through a window and brings Tati and Claire along with him, and they rescue them from the dungeon of the playhouse. Before the group leaves, Helena tells Evie that Nura left something for her. It was a small pouch with a note. Helena never opened it, never sent it to Evie all of these years, but said that Nura told her, only give this to Evie at the right time. They all head back to the manor together, and Evie opens the pouch. It has a small sliver of a picture frame in there, and then it also has a note that says, you can find me here with my friend. Gideon recognizes the piece of frame as one of the portrait frames from their mother's art collection. So Evie says, we have to go back to my home, we have to find that painting, let's go. And the villain says, absolutely not. You're a wanted woman, you're not going anywhere, it is too risky. Of course, Evie, being the stubborn woman that she is, decides, nah, you can't tell me what to do. Tristan ends up going into the village by himself during a festival and getting face paint so that he can be disguised. Little does he know that Evie's already there in a disguise of her own, talking to the portrait frame maker. They meet up, head back to her house, and a little steamy scene ensues. Tristan finally admits that he's worried for Evie's safety, and they end up kissing. They're quickly interrupted though by Malcolm, who happened to be living in Evie's house after he realized that it was vacated. Some of the retired Valiant Guard burned down his tavern, so he had nowhere to stay. Instead of wanting to stay at the manor, he decides to stay at Evie's house, but he knows where that painting is. He goes and grabs it, Evie and Tristan look at it, and Evie realizes nobody knows where that is or who that is. so she has to talk to her father. When they're back at the manor, Evie heads down, talks to her father, and he seems to kind of try to manipulate her a little bit. Evie's not taking any of it and ends up stabbing him in the leg, and on top of that, gets him to confess. The other woman in the portrait is Rena Fortis, Nora Sage's childhood best friend. We learn shortly after that Becky is actually a Fortis child. She was hiding her identity because she didn't want to be associated with her family. The villain knew, but nobody else in the office did. Although it's painful for Becky because she no longer talks to her family, she decides that she's going to take them to the fortress because she's the only one who could get them in. The villain Evie, Tati, Claire, Blade, and Becky all go to the fortress together. When the group gets there, Becky's mom says that Nora Sage is fine, that she's just at another one of their residences with a specialized healer. She said she'll send for her, Nora will be at the fortress in a couple of days, and then Evie and her can reunite. Everyone is so excited to see Becky. Everyone is so thrilled that she's home, and the land seems to come alive when she's there. We learn that Becky is actually the heir to the Fortis fortress. She is to inherit the fortress along with the magic of the land. The plants seem to come alive around her, and they greet her as if they were her family. Shortly after they arrive, the plants and the house realize that Tristan is the villain, and they drag him away to the trench. Now, the trench is a fighting pit that houses the creature of destiny. This is a creature that supposedly knows everyone's destiny, and not only that, will deem whether or not you're worthy to live. Because Tristan got dragged into this pit, the creature of destiny flashed multiple moments before his eyes and is deciding whether or not he is worthy to continue going on. In those visions, Tristan sees himself first as a young boy, kind of ostracized, not really having many friends, and really just having a friend in Edwin the ogre. His father and mother are arguing over what to do with him, and his father wants to send him to apprentice with the king in order to make him more normal. Then we flash forward and see Tristan in the dungeons. He's pleading and begging with King Benedict to let him out, saying that he wants to be good, he doesn't want to be the villain, that he'll give up his power, he wants to do anything to be good. We flash forward again to the day that he met Evie, and he starts to come back to himself and remember who he is. And then we flash forward again to a scene that hasn't yet happened. It's King Benedict holding a knife to Evie's throat, and Tristan decides he's willing to give up anything in order for Evie to live. When the dream version of King Benedict releases Dream Evie, she runs to Tristan and kisses him. He realizes that it's not the real thing, and he says that he would rather have the scraps that the real Evie lays at his feet than have an eternity with a fake Evie. At that moment, real Evie shows up to rescue him. Evie tries to fight the creature, and when that doesn't work, she offers to trade her dagger for the villain's freedom. The creature then admits that the villain already passed the test, that both of them can leave, but then it whispers something in Tristan's ear. He ends up passing out, gets really feverish, and isn't feeling well. They both head out of the ring. Tristan gets taken off to the infirmary so that he can recover, and Evie ends up sitting by his bedside for a long time, but then ends up sparring with Becky's brothers. While she's sparring, Tristan ends up waking up and finding her on the ground, completely worried for her. When one of the brothers says that they have a great deal of love and respect for each other, Tristan decides, no, enough is enough. I have to distance myself from Evie and let her know that there's no chance. So he sits there and completely denies that there's anything between them, that he would never love anyone, especially someone who he employs. And Evie basically shares that it was never hard to love him. They end up sparring with one another and everyone else leaves. And the villain says that he thinks that it's not good that they spend too much time together because he thinks that Evie is the cause of the villain's magic going on the fritz. His magic has been acting strangely, he feels weakened, and something is going wrong, and he thinks Evie is the cause. While they're having their conversation about Evie and Tristan's magic, the Valiant Guards show up to the fortress. They quickly dispatch the Valiant Guards, and then they head back inside, and Rena, Becky's mom, is finally forced to confess everything. She's been working with King Benedict for years in order to find a cure for the mystic illness. In working for him, the Fortis family has been breeding these flowers that are a cross between a memory flower and a magic siphon. This is designed to siphon magic off of various people. When Rena tried to use the flower on Nora Sage, everything went haywire and Nora's power ended up enveloping her, and all that was left from her was a vial of stardust. On top of all of that, she also called the Valiant Guard to take away the villain because she figured that once the villain was out of the picture, Becky would come back home. They decide to head back to the manor. When they get back to the manor, they see that it is in complete chaos. The Valiant Guard have surrounded the manor and it's a losing battle. Gideon and Tristan end up getting cornered and Evie comes to save the day. Evie being in the fight fuels the villain, and he ends up eviscerating almost the entire field. Fluffy the dragon ends up picking off the rest, and the villain finally collapses. And when Gideon asks if Evie wants to go check on him, she says, no, I'm going to respect his wishes. We're going to let him be. Before everyone heads inside, Evie and Gideon are alerted that Lissa was trapped in the dungeon. She had been secretly going to visit their father, and their father tricked her and swapped her for him in the cell. So Griffin Sage is on the loose, and Lissa was captured in the dungeons. The next morning, after everyone has rested a little bit, Evie heads down to see Tristan to tell him that someone was most likely conspiring inside the manor with Griffin in order to help him escape. He says, thank you for your honesty, and he ends up going to have a tea party with Lissa, which is arguably the cutest thing. Pink outfits, a little pink dress for Kingsley. If you go back and read one thing, read that scene. While they're having the tea party, Evie comes in to relieve the villain a little bit. She realizes that it's probably too much for him, that he doesn't want to play along, and she doesn't want Lissa to get hurt. She wants to kind of continue the fun for her. Tristan plays along perfectly and goes above and beyond for Lissa, which absolutely breaks my heart. While they're having the tea party though, Lissa looks at this slab that Becky's mom gave Evie. Accidentally, Nora Sage's stardust, all that's left of her, gets spilled onto the slab by Lissa. It ends up exploding and lighting up, and Evie gets an idea. She asks Tristan if he has any of the stardust left from the creature in the cave. They add that stardust to the slab as well, and all of a sudden it looks like a piece of the night sky with one glaring wishing star there. Evie finally realizes where her mother is. She tells Tristan that they have to head back to the Kissing Oaks immediately. Tristan, Evie, and Blade head back on Fluffy to the Kissing Oaks to find that the land is completely drained of color. The Guardian is no longer there, the color is drained from the area, and everything looks overgrown and decrepit. They make their way back to the cave to find the creature, and Evie returns its piece of night sky. The creature puts the piece of the night sky back up in its place, and because Evie helped the creature again, it grants Evie one wish. Evie says that she knows the creature can't meddle in human affairs, but because her mother isn't a human, she's a wishing star, maybe it can return the wishing star to Evie. He agrees. Nora Sage comes down and reunites with her daughter and shares that she's been able to see everything. She's had a beautiful place in the sky to witness all of the events. She knows about Gideon, she knows about the villain, she knows about Lissa, and she knows about her husband. While they're in the middle of reuniting, the cave starts to collapse. Evie begs the creature to come with them, but it says it has to stay and protect its little piece of the world. All of them leave and head back to the manor, and they decide that they're going to set off and fulfill Renadon's prophecy on their own. Nora Sage says that there's a fourth item that they need, but her memory is a little bit hazy, so they decide that they need to break into the Gleaming Palace, get Renadon's story, the book with the prophecy, and they need to continue on their way to fulfilling the prophecy before King Benedict. At the end of the book, we see everyone going off to bed to get some rest before they continue on their journey in the morning. This one was heart-wrenching. If Evie and the villain cannot be together, I am going to be absolutely devastated. I will riot. Also, if you're watching this now, that means Accomplice to the Villain is out, so you don't have to wait to read the next installment. Happy reading.